Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we've got a really interesting guest, Ines Hubmann. Now, Ines, you're with Hub Digital, and you're the Senior CX Marketing Consultant. I think you're the number one, you'll explain this better, global HubSpot partner, and you're focused on working with marketing teams to make sure that they're doing everything they can to focus on the customer, create that experience that we all want to create. You also are, I just found out, we spoke for about 20 minutes on this, that we're both outdoor enthusiasts and you love hiking. You just did this last weekend, a 2-day hike in Austria where you live. You've lived all over the globe. You're very well balanced. You might be techie on the computer during the week, but on the weekends, you're out, you're around. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you do before we dive in, because we got a really interesting topic today. It's how to stop burning marketing spend in our teams at the same time. But before we start on that, tell me a little bit more about you and what you're doing.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks, Steve, for having me on that podcast. Really excited to be here. And so just talking about myself, as you've already explained, I have quite an international background. Basically, my roots have been in startups. I've been working in the UK before. I went back to Austria, worked for agencies, specifically working on marketing strategies. And I have always been fueled by strategy in general. So really getting to have that deep understanding of a customer, seeing what really drives customers, how they make decisions, and what effectively builds great audience connection. Really, for me, growth was always around psychology, understanding human behavior, and growing with that effectively. And that curiosity of discovering that has led me to work in different markets, understanding different customer behavior, also on a global scale. And now I work at Huble, where it's all about the customer. It's all about humans. And I love that because the company is very human-centric, meaning the human has priority, both on an employer level. So it's very employee-centric, but also we're very client-centric. So meaning we help the clients in any way to find the best solutions. At the same time, we as marketing consultants come in and have this kind of external eye into their whole strategy and really can advise in the best way possible what is best for the customer. So yeah, that's been my path so far.
It's very intriguing. I just want to ask you right away, this whole idea of how do we stop burning marketing spend? Marketing is one of the biggest cost centers inside of almost every company, right? So being efficient in how we spend our marketing and not just burning dollars in our budget, super, super important, right? Especially when you're talking with your CFO. But tell me a little bit before we get into that. I want to get your opinion on this balance that we all have to do in marketing on short term versus long term, and get your perspective on that.
Yeah, and I think that's the one question and the one challenge that CMOs face when they're put on new clients, new projects very early on. Because the fact is that we are measured on the quick wins and we are measured on the instant results very soon when we start working on a project. And what I have discovered working for quite some time on strategy is the more time we put aside for brand and understanding customers, really actively listening, building this relationship with the customers, and really set away more time, the more effective our marketing will eventually be and the higher the results will be, and we will have a lot more to show. So I think it's about keeping this balance between brand and performance marketing and really giving value to brand and a customer understanding very early on. But this is a lot of expectations management to be done from the CMO side. And although performance has often been seen as the hard KPIs and brand is seen as soft KPIs, they actually need to go hand in hand. When we can create that intersection and that balance between both and have it play together, this is actually when the best results are coming from experience.
It's one of the number one things, like you said, right? I talk to CMOs all the time on the podcast here, and the idea that this balance of brand and performance marketing, I have one really important question because the perception is this: they're completely separate. Separate budgets, separate campaigns, separate efforts, everything's separate. Is your perspective that they're separate? Or is your perspective that they actually overlap quite a bit?
They actually overlap quite a lot, I would say. So specifically, even when you're managing a team and you have a brand marketer on the team and a performance marketer, when we develop creatives for performance marketing, it heavily based on messaging. And messaging is part of the brand phase. So the message we bring across is reflected in performance marketing. But we start already often in a tactics phase. So performance marketing is tactics, right? We're focusing on a platform. We're focusing on what that platform can drive. But often we forget what is the message that's going to bring these conversions later down the funnel. So this work we're doing on the brand side is very crucial also for the performance marketers to get the results through. And this messaging and tone of voice and building on these brand foundations, really doing customer research, that's eventually what drives long-term growth for the companies. Often we go very soon into ads and managing budgets, and we're focusing on things that don't really matter for the customer, because the customer, they want to be listened to, they want to be heard, and they want to be understood in order for them to do an action. So basically, it's about being reactive before we're getting active, if that makes sense.
It does. I'd love to have you dive into that a little bit more, because one of the benefits of the HubSpot kind of a tool is that we're getting more and more data than we ever have before, right? And we use that data to whittle it down, right? What's our intent data that we're looking at? What are the engagements? Where are the priorities so that we can do more and more personalized marketing? And it feels very tactical and very reactive. They do these things, so therefore we trigger these things. But you're talking about something about being proactive. So I'd love to hear what you mean by that.
I think the interesting thing working with HubSpot, as you say, me as a marketer working in tech, I'm still data and tech focused, of course, right? This is my daily job. I work in tech and I work with tech businesses, quite large tech businesses. And they need that human approach more than ever. The demand is so high at the moment for it because of the fact that often when I look at tech companies, how their communication is, how the messaging is set up, it's a lot of talk about product features. It's a lot of talk about this is what the product is doing, and it's a lot about complex jargon being used. So many times when I'm being brought on as a consultant, a fractional CMO on new projects, I have a look at messaging. I have a look at, is that message actually understood for your audience? And this is where the customer experience is becoming more and more important. So that human approach is needed by tech, is needed by specifically B2B, because in the past we have been often differentiating. B2B is very formal. We're speaking to businesses. B2C has been seen as more of the emotional side of marketing, where actually B2B can benefit from it so much. And this is the untapped potential we have now as marketers focusing on human connection, focusing on relationship building and empathy that we can bring to tech, which is very interesting.
You said so much interesting things in there. You talked about the messages tend to focus a lot on product and things like that. And the way that I like to think about it, the analogy I have in my own head is it's like being at a dinner party and you get cornered in the room by somebody that wants to just talk about themselves all the time. and you're just trying to get away and they don't stop talking and you're trying to leave. It's like, I don't want to hear about you. Let's focus on me a little bit. The buyers, they want to know what you can do to help them, not about how great your product is. And there was a massive study that was done. I bring it up all the time in the podcast. I think it has such meaning. And you and your CX background, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. A couple years ago, McKinsey did a study and they looked at over 400 highly profitable companies, B2C and B2B, and that had the greatest return on shareholder value. And what they found out is that the number one differentiator across all those companies was CX. We like to think it's our product, but guess what? ChatGPT is writing code these days. If we're a platform, we're a technology, we're not going to have long-term sustainable growth because we have a feature that nobody else has, right? Product differentiation is a blur, and especially to the buyers, because everybody, even if you don't cover what's in the RFP or what they've asked for, they'll still say they do. So from the buyer side, everybody's just saying we do it all. And I want to ask you the question here. CX is the number one differentiator. Just throw it down on the table, your opinion on that.
I truly think it is because of the fact also when we talk about brand marketing, brand strategy, we're still focusing on the brand, right? We're still focusing on us. As you said, we're talking about ourselves. Does the customer really care about it? So when we look at the history of brand marketing, it's still been about how do we do this? How do we communicate our product, our service, whatever? And that's the interesting thing about CX is like putting that lens, really having that eye view from the customer and making these decisions as a marketer from the perspective of the customer. So now when I look at marketing strategy, I really put my shoes in the customer and say, look, would I fill out this form? Would I understand what this company is talking to me about, or does it not make sense? Are we losing customers here? I think the time when we really start building marketing strategies from that perspective and go from ego to empathy, that's when the real friction point is happening. And that's the interesting thing. And I think this is both happening on a leadership side, understanding team members, putting yourself into the shoes of team members, but also from a marketing side, from a customer experience side.
I just wrote down ego to empathy. I love that. I love things that are like so succinct. I had another woman, she was on the podcast, 3-time B2B health tech CMO, and she said, today's brand is tomorrow's demand. And we talked at the beginning here about that CMO is one of the biggest battles is, right, talking about brand and building brand when everybody else wants to be knowing how are we accomplishing this quarter's quota and what does next quarter look like? And so that ego to empathy, what that says to me, but I want to ask you what it means to you. Ego is where we're talking all about us. It's all about our tech. It's all about our product. It's all about us, right? To empathy, which is it's all about you. Am I reading that right?
Exactly. And I think that ego is still needed in terms of setting our goals, following our vision, specifically for business leaders. But what happens from experience is that the more we focus on this vision and results and going internal through our ego, the less we focus on the other. And this is where it's slashing. And this is actually where that shift needs to happen between, okay, I go now into empathy. I understand what you're feeling and how I'm acting upon it to get the best results. So I think in marketing, we have gone a lot into spreadsheet obsession, as you can call it, data obsession, results obsession, right? This is the end result. We don't ask enough questions in terms of why are these results the way they are? How can we influence it through active listening and through relationship building? And this actually needs to happen within companies, that silo building doesn't occur, but also with audiences. So that relationship building aspect can happen internal through a great employee experience and external through the customer experience.
You've now brought up, I think, 3 different times, something that I just can't ignore anymore. this idea of active listening, talking to customers. There was a woman that came on, another 3-time B2B CMO. She's also a value accelerator advisor with Goldman Sachs. And she said, Steve, as a CMO, we should be spending 20% of our time doing nothing but talking to customers because we don't have the business processes set up to actually actively listen that we can actually learn, right? We have this proxy for talking to customers and prospects called sales and customer success. But in sales, there's a shield up in the middle of that conversation they're being sold to. And the rep talks 2/3 to 3/4 of the time. It's a fact, right? So it's not a listening environment, a deep, meaningful listening environment. And in customer success, we're putting out fires, we're answering questions, and we're trying to cross-sell and upsell. So again, you would never say, let's create an active listening program and let's run it through sales or let's run it through customer success. You would never do that. They were set up for completely different reasons. So here's my question, because you work with a lot of different companies. How are CMOs actively listening today? What are the best practices for active listening?
That's a really good question. And I think that's the part which isn't given enough space often. When you're a CMO, again, we're acting on a reactive mode mainly, or a firefighting mode at times.
Yeah.
As you said, because we have been focusing on those quick wins that we need to get through constantly, where it's important that we say, okay, active listening, first of all, is regarding the ICP, right?
Right.
We have
Right.
all the customer information we need. Are we working with an outdated ICP that might need changing and where we need to get more information from a strategic level? The other part is really setting aside time to understand how each different department works on a customer service front, sales front, like CFOs, EOs, understanding all of those visions and aligning together is really important because of the fact that CMOs are the external arm of communication for the business. So often we work very closely with these departments, and it's also about what are their needs and how can we build an overall business strategy, marketing strategy based on an overall business strategy that's already set in place, right? So this active communication, active listening between departments is also really important. And I think just really trying to understand all different views and bringing it together is also one of the big challenges that companies face usually internally, right? How can we as CMOs also work together with sales, for instance, because sales work with the same personas? How can we build a strategy which is a strategy for the customer? We're serving the customer together based on the knowledge you can provide to us, which we need to receive ongoing. So the more this is all in harmony and we've built an umbrella strategy and we've built these pages for active listening, the more you will see business growth and the more you will see customer growth eventually as well.
This whole alignment between sales and marketing is a very well-trodden path, to have an outdoor analogy on top of it. In my estimation, the number one thing that brings alignment is the ICP. That's the voice of highest authority in the business. So if we're truly, and there's not a company out there that says, yeah, we're not customer-centric. No, we're not very customer-focused. Everybody says we are. Are we really living it, though? Because if we're truly living it, then there is one voice that is guiding all departments in the company. And that's the difference right now. Because when you talk about the ego to empathy, right? We are very good at making decisions without consulting anybody. We've been in our careers a long time. We're C-suites, we're a CRO, we're a CMO, we're a CEO. We've been doing this a long time, right? We know what to do. Right? There's not a lack of an ability to make decisions. There is a lack of an ability to really understand that highest voice of authority. So I think when you talk about alignment, the teams that I've talked to, and I've talked to a team, they were the CRO of the year in the United States and his CMO. And we had a podcast, and they said two things were paramount to their success. One was alignment behind the ICP. There's one plan. There's not a sales plan in a market. It was one plan, and they come together and they create it. So this idea of like separate plans and separate objectives, and it just the other thing that they said, which ties back into, I think, the empathy part, and at the very beginning where you were talking about that your company is very people-focused internally and externally. The other part was they attributed over 50% of the success of their company to their company culture. And so I just wanted to throw that out because you talked so warmly and glowingly about human-focused, right? That doesn't come because it was written on a mission statement that lives on a website somewhere. It doesn't come because it was in a strategic document somewhere. There has to be a culture that promotes that. Talk to me about the culture inside of your company and the importance of a human-led or focused company.
I think it's really interesting because, of course, in tech, it's very fast paced, right? Like you would think, like, how can you build the bridge between tech and human effectively? How does that work in the tech space? Because we are in marketing, we are results focused, we are business focused and everything, and it's quite fast paced. I think it had to be a very conscious decision by leadership to go down that route. You have to have a very strong HR team, which is actually putting it into the values of human-centric, but not just having the values written on a paper, but really living it and hiring the right people. And that's a lot to do, again, with emotional intelligence and empathy. If you build that core leadership team of people that have that in them, then you can build an organization based on that. And that is truly special because you hire the right people who follow the same values. I think it has to be a very conscious decision by leadership to go down that road and really saying, okay, we do value our employees so much that we want to provide them with the smoothest onboarding so they stay with us long term. And these are the companies that you will see there is lower turnover, right? People stay for so many years because they feel valued, they feel understood, and they feel taken care of. So that's what happens from an employee experience side, which is very important to have that human-centric focus in an organization. But then it's also what you've built internally as a company culture. You're bringing this to your customers as well. You're bringing this to your clients. And this is the ripple effect that can happen from a great company culture. That's really interesting, actually.
It's very interesting. There's so much at play that we don't focus on. Company culture is not something that we talk, that in general in the B2B industry, it's almost like you don't go to any big B2B conference and hear talking about culture, right? No, but you peel the onion behind the scenes and everybody talks about how important the culture is because it's all about attracting and retaining the right people, and people drive business, right? So I want to have time to come back around because you kept saying so many fascinating things. You took me off track here.
Sorry, yeah, goes a bit further than relationship building because I always try to build the link between leadership and audience relationship building because it ties into together what I'm doing, both from a leadership side, but also from an audience engagement, customer experience side. And I think there's a lot to learn from both sides and incorporate it in each way, each channel. Yeah.
Here's the question I have. So you've talked before about if we go full circle and we come back to the topic that we have here today, which is about how to stop burning marketing spend and teams at the same time. You have a big connection between stopping the burning of marketing spend and the power of real customer insights. What did you mean by that?
I think the more we understand our ICP, the more we actually get more information on our ICP, the less we will burn money eventually. So what I also mean by that is often we look at ICPs, which is a very surface level. So we do have a look at, let's say, job title, right? Demographics, location, these kind of surface level metrics. At the end of the day, we need to dig a bit deeper and go a bit on a deeper level and really think about what are their pain points currently? What are their dream outcomes that they wish to have? How can we take them from A to B? But also maybe not even considering it for now, but also how will these pain points of the customer change in the future? Because if we work with tech companies, we're trying to solve the customer's not even current issues. We might be trying to solve the customer's future issues. So it's even challenging it and thinking ahead of, is this problem we're actually targeting, is it outdated? Do we have a new problem to look at? So this ICP we're looking at needs to be challenged consistently from marketing strategists. And we need to say, look, we need more information on this. We probably need to just speak to the customers more. We need to ask new questions to get this information and to make this as the base of our strategy. The more vague the messaging is, even on ads, performance marketing, the more we're shooting, it's kind of like dust in the, how do you say it? It's very vague, right? We don't have the message that is sticking unless we really can go to niche it down in such a way and be so precise with our messaging that this will drive the best traction in terms of strategy.
I wish we could go on another couple hours because I'm pretty sure we could. But if there was one main takeaway that you wanted the listeners here from the podcast to have, because our poor human brains, we can't remember more than about 2 or 3 things at a time. So what's the most important takeaway that you want people to have?
For me, it's marketing is all about psychology. It's a human approach, a human first approach we need to follow as marketers, CMOs, all the way through. When it comes to leading teams, when it comes to customer audience understanding, let's really listen first. Let's have empathy. Let's build trust through empathy first. And then let's take the next steps. It's so important. And I really say that the best marketers are actually psychologists. They understand human behavior. They understand psychology. They understand the customer experience that goes, and they can form customer experiences that go beyond server level metrics we're looking at. If we manage to do that, then we can really differentiate ourselves as marketers, not following the approach of who's the loudest wins, but who understands the customer gets the best results.
I love it. I'm pretty sure people are going to have more questions. If they do, is it appropriate we gave out a link to your LinkedIn profile so people could reach out to you?
Yes, of course. So they can find me under Ines Hubmann on LinkedIn, so they can reach out to me as well. And always happy to have a chat about human-centric marketing. So yeah, you can come to me with all these questions. And yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast.